Well, hello again, brothers and sisters in Christ. Pastor Mike here. Welcome to our midweek meditation. Usually I get out earlier, but this week has been chaotic with the boys getting ready for their musical this weekend, The Wizard of Oz, and numerous other fun things, medical stuff, this, that, and the other. As you have heard me say at this point ad nauseum, there's never a dull moment. But still midweek meditation, still plenty of texts to look at. There always is. And we have had Reformation, we've had All Saints. Again, continued blessing to All Saints to folks. Hopefully we had a good opportunity to call to mind all those that have gone before and give thanks. I think that's really a good way to start actually kind of the month of Thanksgiving, if you will. For me, November is always kind of that month of gratitude. And let's be honest, starting being grateful for people is a great way of starting. Oftentimes we get caught maybe in gratitude for stuff or this, that, and the other, but being thankful for people is one of the best places to start. And we start by giving thanks to those who have been blessings. And hopefully that also, encourage us to be thankful for those that are still with us. So blessings definitely on that. But now we move into, I don't even know the best term. I sometimes view it as a harder preaching season because our texts and our reality start looking toward two things. One, the end of all things, the culmination of all that is. Christ the King is this important Sunday that we're now moving toward, that calls us to look at and understand that ultimately the reign of Christ, the reign of God, will win. That can often be both joyous and frustrating. Joyous in the sense of that in times of worry, anxiety, knowing that God wins in the end is always a blessing, but often there's anxiety with it, especially twofold. One, when the world seems to be a bit rough at the moment. I know some people can get anxious about, hey, are we living in the end of days? Don't forget, that's not for ours to know, but for ours to trust that the good Lord, well, he's got it covered. But also, there can be the stress of, well, what if God's kingdom doesn't look the way that I want it to? That's always a sticky wicket. We are not in the driver's seats on that one, brothers and sisters. And so we start preparing for that, which then transitions to Advent, but we'll talk about it closer to Christ the King. But in many ways, the season can be hard because it often calls us to think about the ends of things. And ends can be difficult. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. The ending of one's, schooling, especially the end of maybe one of your kids' schooling. That's hard. It's a transition. It's a good transition, but there's often sorrow with it. As new phases begin, old phases end. And that's unfortunately the nature of the beast. And we miss it. And that is part of this season. This Christ the King reality of sometimes we have to let things end and new things begin. And that can be hard. But in the great wheel of the church year, we continue to be grounded in that truth. And really this Sunday is about preparing for those sorts of things. It's this wonderful parable of the 10 bridesmaids and to be prepared. And that is really then some of the questions of what are we preparing for? Because what we're preparing for really dictates how we prepare. I mean, it sounds dumb, but it's important. When it's, obvious things where, vacations or, a snowstorm, those preparations seem a lot easier. But when it gets to these broader, more, maybe existential preparations, it can be hard. What are we preparing for? Even let's say, kids going off and launching. I prefer the term launching. They're beginning this new phase of their existence as an adult in many ways. What are we preparing for? Are we preparing that we're going to lose our kids? Or are we preparing for them to be successful adults? And that's interesting because that whatever lens we use for our preparations guides our preparations and helps us to understand it better. Even then when we talk about, preparations for what does it mean when all things come to an end and Christ reigns? For some, it's, they're preparing for destruction, death, and all these other sorts of things. Luther always had this quote that I loved when asked what would he do if he knew the world was going to end tomorrow. He said, plant a tree. Because he knows in Christ the ends of all these things that are temporal are the beginning of all these things eternal and good and holy and life. And his understanding of whenever Christ comes, whenever Christ joins us, it is fundamentally about life. And so planting a tree is understanding life and growing in all those things. And that is really the interesting question with this text. When we're preparing for something, preparing for maybe a holiday, there are many coming up, what are we preparing for? That is the question that must hang in the air, especially with this text. For as we prepare for Christ the King, what are we preparing for? When we get ready for Sunday, what are we preparing for? Are we getting prepared to do something that we feel forced that we have to do, or the opportunity to hear the good word? What are we preparing for? That might be a little bit more introspective than you are capable of at certain points in time, but God bless. Hopefully when it comes to certain things, though, this can be a blessing. Because what these bridesmaids were preparing for was something that some prepared well, some didn't, because I don't think they understood, well, in the parlance of our time, the assignment. So blessings, brothers and sisters. Hopefully this is good grist for the mill things to think about. I know this week what I have been preparing for has been chaos, and that is probably reflected in much of me going on. Well, blessings, brothers and sisters in Christ. We'll see you Sunday. We'll talk to you soon. Bye now.